Hi, everyone. Hello. Thank you all for joining us on this lovely webinar Wednesday. I hope that you all are ready for an exciting presentation with Queen's University. Again, this webinar Wednesday hosted by College Greenlight, powered by CapEx. This is a webinar series to support counselors and students through the college and scholarship process. So again, thank you for joining us. Today we have Queen's University of Charlotte, North Carolina. They are here to share the good, the bad, and the in-between of the admissions application process. I am your host, Erica Davis, Partner Relations Specialist here at College Greenlight. Launched in 2012 by CapEx, we are on a mission to close the information and opportunity gap by connecting students with valuable resources that will help make the college search process simpler and looking for scholarships easier. To maximize today's webinar, let's go over a few housekeeping. In the chat feature that you'll see on your right is where you can connect with the speakers and engage with other audience members. So don't be shy, feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. At the bottom of your screen, you will see the Ask a Question tab. Use that to ask your questions. If you see that someone has asked the question that you were thinking of, feel free to upvote it so that we can make sure that we get to it. And if you leave early, no worries. We will be sharing the slides and the recording. And we encourage you to take those recordings and share with your friends, colleagues, and community. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Joining us today is Jasmine Lindsay, Senior Assistant Director of Admissions, Evan Sprinkle, Associate VP of Admissions, and Allie Glover, Admissions Counselor, to share with us what they've learned during this reading season and equip y'all with some information that can help you advise your students with the college and application process during this unusual school year. So team, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Erica, for that warm welcome, and good afternoon, everybody. As Erica said, my name is Evan Sprinkle. I currently serve as the Associate Vice President of Undergraduate Admissions at Queen's University of Charlotte. We are thrilled to be able to host this webinar today in partnership with College Greenlight. We are fairly new to having a partnership with them. We just got that cranked up last summer, and we have really enjoyed the community that we have found through the College Greenlight team. So I just want to extend my thank you to Erica and Jonathan and the rest of their team for the service that they provide to CBOs and the way that they're able to connect a lot of folks from all over the country in this tangled ball of college search process that we all are trying to unweave and then make sense of together. So again, we're just really excited to be able to connect with everybody this afternoon. We're thankful that you took time out of your schedule to be here. I've already seen a couple of responses to some poll questions that we do have loaded at the bottom of your screen. You may see some there. Please feel free at any point in time to respond to those. I think it will certainly be good fodder for conversation along the way. And it will also be just good information for us to continue to think about on the college side. As Erica said, what our hope is today is just to kind of talk a little bit about what you can be doing to help your students tell their full and authentic story on their admissions application. Certainly this year and this season has been very challenging for folks on both sides of the search process, colleges and students and their high schools and all those that support them. But I think it also has really shown us a little bit of how resilient we can be, and it certainly has stretched our staff in ways that I think will make us better and able to support students better and families better once all of this stuff calms down. So, but we have certainly seen a direct impact on many aspects of the college application this year. And so that's what we're going to show you today and hopefully engage in a little bit of a conversation. Please feel free to ask questions along the way as well. Some of them we may just respond to you directly through the question box, and then we'll have a time at the end to do some as a group. So Allie is controlling the slides today. Thank you, Allie, for throwing the agenda up there. We are going to spend just a few minutes at the beginning talking about Queens, just so you know who we are and what our campus is about. We'll talk a little bit about the lessons we've learned as we've made it through our first couple of rounds of application review this year. We were able to pull some examples from applications this year that are both good and ones that leave a little bit to be desired that we're excited to share as well. And then we certainly will talk about what you guys can do to support your students through your organizations as we respond to all of this, and think about what the the new normal will be once this is over. So Allie, if you'll advance to the next one. So Queens University of Charlotte is a small, comprehensive university with a liberal arts foundation. I am privileged to hold 2 degrees from Queens. I consider myself double crowned. We're the Royals as our athletic mascot, so we play off that royal theme a lot at Queens. There are a couple of things on this slide. All of the things on this slide are noteworthy, but a couple of things I really want to zero in on to help you kind of understand, at our foundation, what makes us special. And first off is our location. We're located just a few miles south of Center City in Charlotte, North Carolina, which anything about Charlotte, it's one of the fastest growing cities in the country. There's a lot of industry, a lot of people, and just a lot of resources coming into Charlotte. And that really makes it, it's an interesting time to be a young person, to be a college student in a growing city like Charlotte. And the fact that we're only a few miles from the center of town really allows our campus to extend into the city. We have great relationships with employers. We have great placement rates with jobs outside after graduation. And a number of our students stay in the Charlotte area when they graduate. But 2, it just allows our students to have a lot of great social outlets as well. I always tell students, if you're bored at Queens, it's your own choice to be bored, because there's plenty of things to do on campus and plenty of things to do in the city. So we're very fortunate to be located as close to the center city as we are, but we do have a nice, very nice traditional campus feel in one of the most historic neighborhoods in Charlotte. So it's kind of a nice balance there. I also want to talk a little bit about the faculty. There's a stat on here that 5 of our professors have won the North Carolina Professor of the Year award. And I have been at Queens in some capacity for 17 years, whether that's a student or a staff member. And for the entire time I have known Queens, the faculty are some of the most highly rated people and aspects of what makes our campus special. While they're doing plenty of research and they are scholarly in their field and on the cutting edge of information, they really are teachers first and foremost. And so they take that calling seriously. And in classes where your average class size is 15, 16, it's 10 to 1 student faculty ratio, you really get to know your students well. And all of our classes are discussion based. And so there is a lot of interactivity or interaction between the students and the faculty. And they really do challenge the students to take the information to the next level. I like to share this story really quickly because I think it kind of speaks to how our faculty approach the task of teaching our students. I had a good buddy that skipped out on class one day, as many college students might, and you certainly have the ability to do that. As the class started to meet, the professor noticed he wasn't there, and asked around, has anybody seen so-and-so today? And one of our buddies ratted on him and said, yeah, I saw him in his room when I left, so I think he's just hanging out in his dorm. And so the professor said, well, I know where he lives, let's go get him. So he packed up the class, went to his room, knocked on the door, and said, hey, I'm promise I'm not trying to embarrass you in front of your classmates, but what we're doing in class today is like an essential lesson for the entire semester. If you miss it, you will be behind. So we're just gonna have class in your room today. And proceeded to set the class down in his room and have the discussion in the residence hall that day, which again, not to punish him, not to embarrass him, because he wanted him to not miss that particular lesson. 2 other quick hitters for us. We have a required internship program, and because it's a requirement, we do a great job of weaving that into the curriculum. In the sophomore year, students take a class called Career Connections, where they learn how to write their resume 1,000 different ways. They do a bunch of cover letters. They're invited to different networking sessions. And one of the highlights from that class is a mock interview that is recorded and played back for you to watch with people from the Charlotte business community. So you get a chance to kind of see yourself on camera and talk through the interview that you just went through with that person to learn some tips and tricks to help you improve in that way. This program was really what drew me to Queens. We have some incredible stats on our placement rates for our graduates that we'd be happy to share after the webinar is over. And the last thing I want to talk about before I turn it over to Jasmine is our international travel program. We rank the top 20 nationally for the percentage of students that travel abroad before they graduate. We have a program that is built into the cost of tuition. So every year students are contributing towards an international trip that they're able to take at some point in their 4 years at Queens. And we have short-term faculty-led trips, semester abroad, summer internship programs, language immersion, and everything in between. So students really have a lot of choice and a lot of options for the international travel program. When it was my turn to travel, I thought if it's paid for, my tuition was the farthest place I could go. That summer, we happened to be offering a trip to Australia. So I thought, well, that's probably about as far as I could go to literally go to the other side of the world. And just had a blast there for 3 weeks with some of my classmates and a couple of professors, learning the things we had studied in a class before we went. So there is an academic component and an experiential component. So all those things, plus the majors that you see, really make Queens what we think is the best of both worlds. A small school with an intimate learning environment, but all of the trappings and the resources of a big city really give you the best of both worlds. Small, intimate learning environment, robust resources at your fingertips. Certainly, I'm a believer. Jasmine is also an alum. Allie is quickly falling in love with Queens as well. She's newer to our staff. And so we're, again, excited to be here today. And with that intro, I'll turn it over to Jasmine Lindsay, Senior Assistant Director of Admissions, to walk us through some of the lessons we've learned and a few other things that we've reflected on from this year.
All right, thanks, Evan. So again, my name is Jasmine, and I also have the privilege of having been double crowned at Queens with both my undergraduate and graduate degrees from Queens, and could sit here and talk to you about our institution for a week, but we won't do that. What we'll do today is talk about lessons that we as an admissions office, as an institution, as individual professionals in the college access environment have learned as a result of our really big application rounds that we've gone through this year. And so I want to talk about first the lessons that we as an institution have learned and the ways in which we've responded to those lessons. I think it's no surprise to any of you that students and yourselves, likely myself, I have felt it a lot lately, is that there's a lot of chaos. Students are attending school virtually here. They're back in school for a day or two. They're not able to do the activities that they're typically used to. This is a huge disruption for many folks, and students, I think, are feeling it in a special and not a good special way. And so what we can do as an institution, we've learned, is to streamline this process for students. So typically, our students, our incoming prospective students and families would work with our admissions office through, like you are probably familiar with the admissions process, and would work with a different financial aid counselor through the financial aid process. And as you all likely know, sometimes those questions and concerns can very often intermingle, overlap, and intertwine. And so we've decided to streamline that process this year and equip our admissions counseling staff with the ability, the tools, and the resources necessary to have those critical financial aid conversations with our prospective students and families. That's only one example of how we've kind of streamlined the process for students. Our communication efforts are doubled down to drive students where they need to go. Our efforts and on an operations standpoint of processing documentation, of leading students to their application checklist and portal is streamlined this year. We want to do everything we can in a chaotic world to be a consistent factor in the students' admissions process. Again, no surprise that in events, gathering, and any sort of engagement with students this year just looks different. We can't have the events that we might have had in the past. Hopefully we're back to them soon, and we've started to do that. But it just looks a little bit different. We, like every other institution out there, have had to pivot to virtual events back, hard to say, but almost a year ago now, to virtual events that expose prospective students and families to Queens, to the college process, expose admitted students to the further questions that they have. We typically host a competitive scholarship program in January to evaluate our top students for our larger and most prestigious academic merit awards. Obviously, we could not host a 100, 200 person event this January. And so we've had to pivot and look at that a little bit differently. And we've really realized the biggest lesson, and this is what will really drive most of our conversation here today, is that the student story, the story of your students, can be told in many different ways. And so we've had to respond to that and let them tell us that story in many different ways, whether it's through application material that we have historically used as an institution. We are no stranger to a holistic application review process. We'll talk a little bit about that. We have done that for several years, but we've had to go even deeper this year, in a year where we can't engage with students in the same way that we have been able to before. As a result, we implemented an optional admissions interview for students this year. Any senior or any entering student, whether they had applied or not, could choose to do an interview during our first round of application review in our early action and early decision rounds. And that allows the student to tell their story in a more personal way, and allows us to evaluate them in, I think, a more unique and a more individualized way. So we've been really excited about that. So if Allie can move us to the next slide, the biggest lesson that we have learned, drum roll please, is that the application is a story and it needs to be told completely. I think that's the biggest component there. I don't know, if you have talked to your students at your high schools or at your community organizations and mentioned it in this way, that the application is a story, that's how it feels to us. And the most important part of that is that the student needs to tell it from start to finish in its entirety. And I don't mean to say that we want to know about when they were a toddler. Sometimes they like to go, here's where I was born and here's where I am now. But I'm saying that the whole story needs to be told completely. So we have three aspects I want to hit on quickly, and then we'll jump into some examples with Allie. The context of a story is always important. Students sometimes want to jump in and tell us things here and there, but the context setting is critical. Letters of recommendation can provide excellent context for students. At Queens, we, again, do a holistic application review. We have an optional piece of a letter of recommendation. It's not a required application item, but it is something that many students choose to submit. I would say more often than not, I'm reading one or more letters of recommendation, often from college counselors, CBO counselors, academic teachers, and instructors. But the way in which you all, and Allie, I think for me, yep, you're good. Okay, wanted to make sure it pulled back up there. Great. The way in which you all can maybe help set this context, if maybe you're writing a letter of recommendation or you're talking to students about their letter of recommendation, how has the student reacted to challenges compared to their peers? That is something that we find very useful, especially in a COVID world. I read sometimes in letters of recommendation where our school went virtual and most of my students, kind of fell off a little bit with the virtual instruction. But Allie was there every day for office hours and for class time. And she was engaged, and she even reached out more than most students, more than she normally would in this setting. So how has the student reacted to challenges compared to their peers? Highlighting things that the student either hasn't or can't articulate in the application. And I think often you all are at least somewhat privy to what's going on in the application, what the student has talked about in the application. And so the letter of recommendation is a great time for you to highlight what's going on that maybe the student hasn't mentioned, whether it's something in their personal life, whether it's an academic challenge that they were not able to articulate properly in the application or didn't feel it was their place to do that. These things can be great additions to letters of recommendation. The community disruption portion of at least of the Common App, has been added this year as a result of the pandemic. This is another place that students can give a lot of context to what's going on in their life and what is going on in their story. What challenges have they faced and how have they overcome them? I think oftentimes, and this is similar to that additional information box in the Common App, students want to maybe write their essay about a challenge that they faced, or they want to write their essay about an academic struggle that they've had. And I try to encourage students, leave that for the community disruption or for the additional information piece. Set the context there. Use the essay to tell us something that you're passionate about, something that shares a little bit of behind the curtain of you as a student. So they certainly have that option to do. and what sort of experience have they had in their high school during this virtual world that we live in. If their grades are different because of the virtual instruction or because of the effects of the pandemic, we'd like to understand that, and the community disruption box is certainly an excellent place to put it there. The second thing that we want to touch upon is the extracurricular activities. They can really make or break a student. I checked out the polls that you all have been answering, and I appreciate you doing that. Feel free, if you haven't already, to go to the polls down at the bottom of your screen and answer those questions. It is unanimous from what I can see that students most struggle to articulate their employment or their family responsibilities. And that is, I'm sure the same for Evan and Allie, is not a shock to me in the slightest. We see it all the time. So hopefully we can maybe touch upon that a little bit and how they can maybe make the most of that. But we want to, you can see the things that are on here. We want to know what a student is doing. We want to understand the impact of that activity or that organization or that opportunity on a student. And I think it really starts with the description that they use. We see everything from nothing, they've literally written nothing, to basketball player, I shoot that ball. That's their description. From that to a full two paragraph explanation of what they're doing with their beta club. We need to find a happy medium, right? A balance. We need to know the big hitters. What are you doing in that organization? What's the point of the organization? And if you haven't already listed it in the heading, what's your role? Do you have a title? Have you done something that distinguishes you from others? Maybe you've attended a state level competition. Maybe you have placed in the top 5 in the poetry competition at your school. Those things that set you apart from others. And the pandemic obviously has had an impact on the ability for students to participate in extracurricular activities. And I think this is tough for students too. They think, well, I'm not doing it anymore because of the pandemic. I can't put it on there. Or there just aren't as many options now because I'm not going out to school every day. Articulating extracurriculars that have been suspended or altered during the pandemic is totally fine. And you might be telling them this already, but we want to know what they would be involved in if it wasn't for the pandemic, those things that would continue. And sometimes students are doing really cool things during the pandemic. Some of them maybe aren't as cool. So I put that little side note there. If they're maybe just hanging out playing some video games, maybe that's not something to add to the high level extracurricular list. But I read an application recently where the student had taught themselves to refurbish small motor engines. They were fixing lawnmowers and different yard equipment for neighbors with the free time that they had. That's pretty cool, and I could totally use that in my life. So they need to articulate those sorts of things. And one thing that I think is huge and really huge for you all, if you're leading a community-based organization or you work with students that are a part of a community-based organization, we don't know what we don't know. If an organization isn't familiar to us, we don't, unfortunately, and we're a small school, but we don't have the time to look up every organization within every application to find out what it is. If somebody lists an organization out in Washington, D.C. that I'm not familiar with, I want to know what's going on. What are you doing out there? What is the mission of your CBO? What do you do every day? What's your involvement? I work very closely with CBOs here in the Charlotte area. I have one in particular that pops up a lot called Carolina Youth Coalition. And I know, because I engage with them in such a way, what the students are doing. They're spending 2 to 3 hours every weekday after school at the organization to work on their resumes, to build life skills, to work on self-efficacy skills, applying for scholarships, all of these sorts of things. But if I just saw Carolina Youth Coalition and no description, I would have no idea. That's huge. So please show your students how to articulate what they're doing in your organization, which I really would appreciate on our end, so we know. So the last thing, and I see a question in here about the extracurriculars, about family responsibilities. Let me touch upon that before I follow follow up on this last lesson here. How do you describe, thanks, Allie, how do you describe the extracurriculars like taking care of younger siblings? So if a student is doing the Common App, there is a section that is quite literally titled Family Responsibilities, and they're able to articulate in that description what they do. I think the biggest thing is telling us how many hours are they spending, what all are they doing. The best ones I see are students saying, I have 4 younger siblings, my single mom works after school every day, I get them taking care of their homework, I make dinner, I hang out with them, I watch them until my mom gets home, or I have to take my 2 younger siblings to school every day. Whatever they're doing, those big hit items, we want to know about that. So just use that description box in there as well. I don't know, Allie or Evan, if you want to jump in and add anything. You all read the applications just like I do. Anything y'all would add?
No, I think that that's great. The only other thing I would add is that if there's ever something that a student isn't sure how to write that, then I would say that they always can email us or call us. And so I feel like we're always really happy to also help them form their application and also help them find out what type of things might be missing.
Yeah, absolutely. There was in the polls too, it talked about work as well, in addition to family responsibilities. And I think this is even easier, honestly, but I just think students don't think about it. They don't think about their part-time job as an extracurricular activity. It's quite easy for them to say, I work at, Harris Teeter. If you're not familiar, that's a grocery store in North Carolina. I know it's not everywhere. It's the big grocery store I go to. I work at the local grocery store for 20 hours a week for 35 weeks out of the year. Super easy. That tells us everything really that we need to know, unless they want to add that they're a shift manager or they train people or whatever. But they just need to put it on there. They just need to know that counts just as much as anything else. So I hope you can articulate that for them as well. Thank you for the question. Okay, so the last thing I want to touch upon here, really before I turn it over to Allie to show you some real life examples, is test optional is such a hot button topic right now. I can think of a limited number of schools or states that have not gone test optional with their review process. Queens was test optional before the pandemic, so we have a little bit more experience under our belt when it comes to what do we do when we don't have testing. But, that's not to say that this year doesn't look different, because it does. In our first year of test optional review, we had about 30% of our students choosing not to submit testing. So a large majority of our students were still submitting standardized testing. This year, it has completely flipped. So we have nearly 70% of students choosing not to submit testing. It is a rarity for me to open up an application and see that they are submitting standardized testing. So in the absence of testing, what are we looking at? What can we consider? And the biggest thing I can say is that all of the other items, especially those that are optional in an application review, become that much more important. At Queens, we have several optional items. A letter of recommendation I mentioned is one, an interview is one, essay is required. The extracurricular activity section, while it's usually filled out, a student could, skip it, I suppose, but those items become that much more important in the review. Letters of recommendation go a really long way when we don't have testing there. It just feels to us, for some reason, when we don't have a test score, when we don't have a letter of recommendation, when we don't have extracurricular activities, we're really left with the transcript and maybe, and their essay that maybe they hopefully took their time and wrote, but sometimes maybe they didn't. And so we're looking at one or two facets of a student, and that's unfair to the student if we don't get to see the whole picture, and we really want to do that. The quality of writing is even more important in this regard. We see, and this is a bit anecdotal, I don't want to throw numbers at you. We see a correlation between the quality of a student's writing and their standardized test scores, and we have in the past. And so without that, the quality of writing becomes that much more important. If we don't have a letter of recommendation, if we don't have a standardized test score, and all we have are the transcript and the writing, it becomes very crucial. Extracurricular involvement, we obviously talked about, is very important. I put demonstrated interest on here because I think folks always want to hear a little bit about it. I just, schools do so many different things with this. And I think it's honestly, for me, is a question. I wish we had all the answers. It's still a question for me. I don't know. And I'm being vulnerable with you here. I don't know exactly what the answer is to this question, because we know that students are at different abilities to visit, to engage with us in certain ways, to show us that they're interested. And virtual world has heightened that opportunity a little bit, but still, students aren't always as advantaged as others. And so, it's tough, but it also is important, especially for a small institution that is heavily enrollment driven and that sort of thing. We want to make sure that our students are interested in coming here if we're devoting the time to it. So I left this as a question. I'm open to your feedback, and I think Evan and Allie too would love to see in the chat box or wherever it is your thoughts. What do you think about demonstrated interest? What do your students think about it? To be honest with you, we don't calculate it in a calculation way that some institutions do, but it's something that we are very much able to track and can impact how we move forward. So it's a question right now. I don't have the answer for you. I'm going to turn it over to Allie. I want to be respectful of the flow here to talk through a few real life examples of these applications that we see before we wrap it up with what you can do and that sort of thing. So Allie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jasmine. Hi, everybody. I am Allie Glover. I'm an admission counselor here at Queens. So I currently work with all of our students from Western North Carolina, South Carolina, and from Tennessee as well. So I think I saw we have some Appalachia and some Tennessee people here. And so I'm your girl. Thank you guys for making it out. Before I move on to going over all of our examples, I did want to take a moment to answer some of the questions that I saw popped up in our chat box. We have a question from Pamela. If an applicant does submit their test score, are they viewed differently since it's been difficult taking the test? So if I'm understanding your question right, we are not going to review a student differently if they've taken a test now versus if they had taken a test last year. So if a student is able to test and if they're happy with those scores, then I would say that they definitely can send those in. But we aren't going to knock anyone if they have not been able to take those scores, or if they have not been able to take those tests. Jasmine and Evan, do you have anything to add to that? Okay, wonderful. Okay, and we have an answer coming in on our demonstrated interest question from Sonia. Tell them that demonstrated interest means to participate in anything the school offers. Yes. And something I would add on is also there's a student who I was emailing last week, and they weren't able to come to any of our virtual things. And so they said, hey, I can't come, but I love your school and I'd love to call you. And I think that that's great also. So any way that they're able to reach out. Thanks for sharing that, Sonia. So going over some of the examples based on what Jasmine talked about. First, we'll go over that total school context and those letters of recommendation. So something that I want to emphasize, so some of these examples are strong and some are weak. I don't think that weak means bad, but what we mean by weak is basically that basically means that this element isn't contributing to that story of that student, right? And so that is what we're really trying to get at here. So if you guys want to take a moment to kind of skim over this, so to kind of walk you through, this is a student This is an applicant from this year who I believe is a deferred student currently. And so looking at this letter of recommendation, the first 2/3 of it really just list all of those extracurricular activities. So they say that they are a member of Beta Club, National Honor Society, basketball, and really just list everything. And that doesn't necessarily add anything to the application because the student already did that, right? So I'm not learning anything extra. And then talking about this final paragraph here, I think that they're saying lots of positive things, right? They're saying they are outstanding, strong, but I don't think that they're telling us why or how. So they're not adding to that student's story, right? So going to look at a strong example on the other side of that, this is one that really tells us who the student is, really tells us all of that context. And so starting about school context. So they're not only saying that he is a part of a club and also works here and does this, they are saying he is taking these challenging classes while he also has a job and is involved in various things. And they say that he founded one of the largest clubs there at their school. So that's a concise way to basically say, here are all the things that they're doing in the context of this school. And then in the second part, I think that they really paint a photo of who this picture is, paint a photo of who this student is. They really tell that story. They talk about his growth and how far he's come and also what his goals are. So if I were to read this, I feel like I know who this student is, right? Now, something I do want to point out, lots of times you may not have time to write 3 whole pages. You also may not know all of your students. Something I didn't mention during my intro is, so I've been at Queens for a bit over 1 year now, but I actually used to work at a CBO. So I was a college advisor. I was working in a public North Carolina high school, and my senior caseload was roughly 400 students. And I also worked with 400 juniors, sophomores, and first year students also. So I didn't have the chance to really get to know everyone. I also did not have the time to necessarily write 3 pages. But I think that you can offer the context of the school, right? So it's like something that I would do if there's a student and maybe I haven't met with them, but I know that they have a 3.0, then I could tell a school, look, you might not think a 3.0 is that great, but 50% of my senior class actually has lower than a 3.0, right? So I think using any context that you have can really be helpful. Moving on to the community disruption section. This is something that is new this year. And so really, I think just making sure that everything on the application is in the proper place and that everything is necessary is very important. One of the reasons that I love Queens is because we are a school that is going to read every single page, every single word, but also not every school will do that. And so I would say to make sure that the application is intentional. So this student, they actually write in the 3rd line, they write that their family has yet to be directly affected by COVID-19 due to their level of caution and ability to adapt. And it's been nothing that they couldn't overcome. And so they're really saying my community has not been disrupted. And you'll see in the second part, they're talking about one of their extracurricular activities. and really saying and really just focusing more on the leadership role. And I feel like that would be best served. I think that would be best served if they're in that EC portion of their application. And so an example of how a student could properly use this is this one here. This is a student. She writes that her father is an essential worker in a hospital, and so she was living with him. He tested positive for COVID-19, and so she had to quarantine in her room. She wasn't able to take the ACT. She couldn't go. She couldn't go to school. Her dad could not go to work, and so I feel like this really will change the lens through which I read the entire file, because I know the way the student has been, I know the way things have changed for them, whether that's in their personal life or in their academic life as well. So make sure that students fill this out if it's something that they need, right? And then I know we're running short on time, so I'll quickly show you the extracurricular section that Jasmine did a really good job of explaining earlier. So this first one is a weak example, because if you look down lower, you'll see that the school counselor wrote, this student loves baseball, and this student has played since he was born. He actually was an all-county athlete, but his baseball program was canceled due to COVID-19, and so he just didn't put that down because it was canceled. If a student would participate in something, but they aren't able to, but that's not their fault, make sure that they write that down, and make sure that they write down everything that they've done make sure they write down things they've done last year. And so in the description, I think that would be a great place to basically write, hey, I absolutely love this sport, but I haven't been able to participate due to COVID-19. And so a student that shows the proper way to do that, is this one here. You'll see that they list all of their activities. So whether that is service or if it's academic, and they also list the years, hours, the leadership, as well as what that organization is. So that is that level of depth that we were talking about earlier. So those are just some of our tangible examples. And so now I'm going to turn things back over to Jasmine.
Yeah, thanks, Allie. So I hope that was helpful to just see some real examples of. Great. Susan says, yes, super helpful. I love it. Thanks, Susan. I'm glad that was helpful for you. So as we wrap this up, what can you do as a community leader, as a mentor, as a supporter of these students? You are the editor of the story. You hold the key, I think, in some regard to unlocking the story for the students. The first 3 bullets you see here really reflect back onto the 3 lessons really that we highlighted about the context of the story, the extracurricular, the importance of the extracurriculars, and really telling the full story, especially in the absence of testing. And the last thing on here, and I can't take credit, Evan told me to add this, and I just get to talk about it. Maybe he will too. But Evan is the best question asker I think I know. And it's true. I find that when you're asking students powerful questions about what impacts them on a day-to-day basis, what are they passionate about, what sparks something in them that they can take onto a college campus. When you start asking those types of questions, I think you get from students the story that they need to tell. And so I'll let Evan speak to it a little bit more, and he has our last couple slides to wrap us up and tell us where we go from here. But if you can ask a student a powerful question, I think you make a lot of difference in the story that they feel comfortable telling in an application process.
Yeah, thanks, Jasmine. I think that that point is, is well made, because what we see, and you guys have kind of commented on this or led down this path in the polls and talking that, many students, I think, find colleges through recommendations through family or friends, and they often kind of talk like, or we can tell they are talking on their application materials, just like they've kind of been talking with their family and their friends. They're not really personalizing things. They're just talking in cliche terminology that they've heard other people use, and they're kind of recycling it because they think that's what they should do to get, to the place that they want to try. And so a powerful question, or really getting, through some of the first layers of like, well, that's just kind of what I've been exposed to, so that's what I'm going to tell you now. Like, that really allows the student to enter into the college search process with a better understanding of themselves, but also a lot of confidence too. I think one thing we see is this process and this pandemic has really made students, I think, lose a little bit of confidence in how to navigate this process well. I think they kind of are just, it's like the American Gladiators, if you're old enough to remember that show, and you're like getting shot out with that tennis ball cannon and you're like running from one barrier to the other. I used to love that game, but it was like always so anxious. Because like, I know if I get to that place, I'm safe from the tennis balls, but there's a moment where I'm really exposed. But I think that point is really one that's important. And then lastly, the other thing, this is not necessarily related to the application components necessarily, but I think it is just worth, putting this out there as something to think about. There is going to be an aspect of this pandemic that remains in place forever. As a college admissions officer, we have learned the value of a virtual visit. And while we are anxious to return to a full slate of on-campus visit programs, we will always maintain some virtual presence from this point forward, because we've seen that it allows us to expand our reach to students, and maybe for students even expand their reach as well. I hope that makes it more accessible, but I know oftentimes as we talk about access to technology and things of that nature, it's not an equitable platform. So that is a challenge in and of itself. But I think there is something about mastering some of these virtual options that will have to be part of the college search process moving forward. And one of those that we've engaged with this year, and I might encourage you guys to check it out as well, is Initial View. This is a platform where students can give us what they call a 30-minute elevator pitch. It's called EPIC, elevator pitch something. And that way the student can give us kind of a 30-second snapshot of who they are, highlights of their story. As a college, we can also respond to it with a 30-second video personalized to that student. This year, we were able to connect with 40 students from California alone through that platform that we might not have had the opportunity otherwise without all this infusion of virtual stuff. So it's not going anywhere. It's certainly not going to be a silver bullet. But it is going to be something that I think we're dealing with for quite a long time. So just kind of throwing that out there, lobbing it out as a softball for future thought and programming that you guys are thinking about within your organizations. A couple other things just to plug really quickly. If you want some more information about Queens, we do have our next application deadline of March 1st. We are offering visits. You can see our options there. We also have a really experienced staff with a lot to offer to students just as experts on the enrollment process. So we would love to be included in any new panels or workshops that you're doing, and Allie can facilitate all of those needs and connect you to the right people on our team. And then lastly, I have started this year an admissions blog that I'm doing mostly monthly right now, and it's specifically geared for high school or CBO counselors, just to kind of hear from my mouth or my fingertips what I'm seeing, what's important to me, and why I think it matters. So I would invite you to take a look at that or sign up to be a part of the distribution list for that as well. And so again, we're super thankful that you guys took some time. I think we have a couple more questions or thoughts. So let me read those out to the team really quickly. Allie, this question is directed toward you. Specifically for students who are from rural areas, are there specific experience that you've noticed that these students do before coming to Queens to transition them to the city and the college successfully? Certainly, I think, Charlotte as a city, it can be a little bit of an overwhelming place from the outside, but what have you seen?
Definitely. That's a really great question. I know for a lot of these students, a lot of them find colleges when they're able to go to some kind of a sport camp or tour. I think for those students, I think being able to see a college campus that is outside of their town is just so wonderful and invaluable to kind of let them see what is outside of the community that outside the community they are in. So that's where I think any virtual tours could really come in handy. I know here at Queens, we actually have a program. We have a program for our first year students. It's a summer bridge program that is called Thrive. It's for ethnic and racial minorities, Pell eligible students, and first generation. And so they're able to come to campus. I believe it is 1 week early, and they're paired with a current student and really just have someone to talk to someone who I think has been through that experience with them. And I think encouraging them to really see any campuses and reaching out to an admission counselor. A lot of students I found from when I was in a CBO, they all think that we're like scary old men who have some like bow ties and really like read their application, say their GPA is too low, they weren't the president of their club. But all of us are like normal, nice people. So I think that when they're able to call us, I think that they're able to talk about all of the concerns that they have, and then they'll know. I think they'll be able to know more if their school is a good fit.
Yeah, thanks.
Long-winded answer, but I'm passionate about rural schools.
And Allie, what's wrong with bow ties? Come on, I like a good bow tie.
Sorry, Evan.
All right. Yeah, Jasmine, there's a question in the chat from Pamela. How do you advise a student if she has stellar grades but no extracurriculars or experiences due to helicopter parents preventing them from partaking in the events? Please advise.
Yeah, love it. So I do think that additional info box, whether they're doing the Common App and it's there, or whether they just submit a Word document or additional piece to a school for additional information, is a great place to put any of those, let's call them unique situations, maybe explaining why they can't partake for whatever reason in those types of extracurricular activity. So I think that's number one. Number two, I would challenge the student to think about how they can articulate what they're doing with their time. If it's not participating in an organized club at the school or organized sports or leadership opportunity, they are doing something when they're not in school. And maybe it really is just sitting at home. I don't know the situation, but I would venture to say that there is something that they're passionate about, that they're spending time doing, whether it's an organized activity or not. Are they refurbishing and selling shoes on eBay? Are they teaching themselves Japanese language? Are they really into drawing sketch work? Are they passionate about something, and can they turn that into a really good story? So that's the best advice that I have. I also would say very quickly that just a student with strong grades, that's really key too. So students who have strong grades, who are enrolled in challenging coursework and have the academic ability to succeed on a college campus, at least in the type of institution that Queens is and those that are similar to us, that's going to go a long way. So I wouldn't stress too hard on that student that they need to freak out because their parents won't let them involve themselves in something else. So.
Yeah, I think the comment that Allie put in the chat is an important one too. Like, we're not looking for perfectly polished gems in the application process. It's okay to still have some rough edges, right? Because we know that college is for the smoothing out process, right? The foundation has been built, but we're putting some of the finishing touches on these young people. And so it is great for them to maybe express their desired ways to be involved once they have the ability to do that. Not just what they've done, but how they might be able to contribute to the campus community and the things they're excited about. Because a lot of times that tells us just as much of the story as, I've been the captain of this team, or I've done the other things. That is helpful as well. We might have time for One more quick question before Erica jumps back on here and tells us all the things we did wrong and doesn't invite us back next time. Are there any more questions in the chat or even in the question section down low? If not, Erica, please come back and send us out.
The only thing that you did wrong, Evan, was use that analogy of a softball to equate to something that's easy. I am a softball athlete. It's not easy. You don't softball somebody something.
That's true. What if I said adult church league underhand softball? That's what I meant, not fast pitch Division II intense collegiate softball.
There you go. Exactly.
Oh, awesome team. Thank you all so much. You all did fantastic. And thank you, audience, for your time, for your questions, for your feedback, for your notes. I would like to first ask you all, Evan, Jasmine, Allie, if there are any last minute words of encouragement that you would like to give to the counselors in the room. I'm sure they'd much appreciate that.
I would just like to say, I know when I worked at a CBO, I felt like there were students that slipped through the cracks and there was so much more that I could be doing. But the work you guys do is so important and valuable, and you guys help these students so much. And I think the conversations that we're able to have with all of you and the context and guidance you are able to give them is just wonderful. And so I know it also might be extra hard when you are sitting like all by yourself in as we are all working from home. And so I just want you to all know that all of you have a whole team out here. I mean, we have people who are from Washington and Wyoming and Texas. So all of you are in this together, and keep it up.
Awesome.
Yeah, do all of that. Alex says it best.
Well, sounds good. Well, thank you all again so much for sharing your expertise and being here with us. But audience, before you leave, please make sure that at the bottom of your screen you'll see a feedback survey link. We'd love to hear from you all how we did, how they did, and continue to make sure that we are providing you all with webinars that speak to your needs and to your students. So as you can see on the screen, if you have any questions for our Queens team, this is how you can contact them. But with that being said, and of course, make sure that you click on that feedback link. If there aren't any last minute questions, that is all for today. I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon. Don't forget to drink your water, be safe, and we'll see you all next time. Very nice. Bye, y'all.